Falling Walls Circle, Challenges and Foresight.
Welcome to the Falling Walls plenary table. Fusion made in Germany. Dream or future reality?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Melanie Windridge. I'm the founder of Fusion Energy Insights. In the last 10 years, fusion has transformed from an academic pursuit to a burgeoning industry, with over 70 private fusion companies around the world, 4 of which are in Germany, and private investment of over $10 billion. In 2022, a laser fusion experiment in America, the National Ignition Facility, or NIF, achieved a breakthrough milestone of ignition, so more energy out of the fusion reactions than was put in to drive them, to get them started. This demonstrated the scientific possibility of achieving fusion on Earth. Germany has a strong history of fusion research, operates the ASDEX tokamak and the Wendelstein 7X stellarator. And this year, Germany's high-tech agenda, fusion was identified as one of 6 critical future technologies. And the government has adopted a draft fusion action plan, which commits more than €2 billion for fusion by 2029. I'd like to give you a few recent announcements from German-based fusion startups. So Proxima Fusion in Munich raised €130 million in a Series A funding round in June 2025, which was the largest early-stage funding round ever by a European fusion startup. Gauss Fusion in Berlin has published a full conceptual design report for its giga commercial fusion plant. Marvel Fusion in Munich raised €113 million in Series B for its laser-based inertial confinement fusion approach. And Focused Energy, a US-German company, signed an MOU with RWE and the German state of Hesse to develop a 1 gigawatt power plant, fusion power plant, at the former Biblis nuclear site. So the current German government has made its goal clear. The first fusion power plant will be built in Germany. So how realistic is this goal? Is Germany prepared for the technological and economic challenges posed by fusion power? And can fusion research strengthen Germany's economy? To discuss these questions and more, let me introduce our panelists. Firstly, Hartmut Zohm, the department head at the Max Planck Institute for Plasma Physics, Garching. David Gann, chairman of UK Industrial Fusion Solutions. Frank Nürnberg, global head of sales at Heraeus Covantics. And Peter Schroth, head of Fusion Research Division, the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research, BMFTR. Thank you. So first of all, Hartmut, where are we now in terms of the status, the technological status of fusion energy? Is the science solved, and do we know how to build a fusion power plant?
Well, I think not quite. So actually, there is a objective measure of this, which is called technology readiness levels, which is a number from 1 to 10. So 1 is sort of a crazy idea, and 10 is the product. And we recently made an analysis so for magnetic fusion, which is, you mentioned ASTEX upgraded W7X, which we are doing in the magnetic confinement. We are in between 4 and 6 and maybe 7 in some areas. And I also know the perception is that you go from research to industry when you reach 7. So I think we still have a phase where we need a lot of research, but we already shake hands with industry, and we should now develop the industry in this. Then there is inertial fusion, which I think is on terms of the TRL a bit lower than this, but again, this is on the agenda and should be developed in Germany.
And inertial fusion is the laser fusion concept.
It's
right?
the laser fusion, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so they made a self-assessment where they are up to 4 in some areas, but there are areas where they're down to 1, where it's really not that developed.
So there's still a lot of science that needs to be done, would you say, before moving to a power plant?
Yes, and also, I mean, historically, laser fusion has not always looked at peaceful purposes of this, and so they haven't put as much energy and effort into studying power plant solutions as we have done in magnetic fusion. I think this is the part this is missing. The plasma part looks great, you mentioned NIF, but the part of the technology around it is still something that needs more thought and to be developed than on the magnetic fusion side.
Mm-hmm. And what about when you're moving from the science to an actual full-scale power plant? Are there other systems or other things that need to be done besides just getting the fusion reactions happening?
Well, the most important thing is the breeding of the fuel. When you use tritium, which is the hydrogen isotope, which it does not exist on Earth because it has a half-short lifetime, 12.4 years or so, you have to breed this in the world by the neutrons, which come from fusion. And this is something that we really need to develop in the sense that we only have proof of principle experiments of this. That's actually the one with the lowest TRL. And this is the one that we should really focus on in the technology development, I think. Which, by the way, Germany does both physics and technology in R&D. We're strong in both of these.
Okay, so there's still systems that need to be developed that will be needed for a power plant. And Peter, so there's been a lot of activity in fusion in recent years. How has the BMFTR funding for fusion changed over the last couple of years, and why?
Yeah, I think it has changed quite a bit. If you look back at the time, let's say like 10 years ago, we had just institutional funding in Germany, like for the IPP and for the research centers in Karlsruhe and in Jülich. There was no project funding, and that changed. The change started about 3-4 years ago when the ministry introduced a new funding strategy, a new funding scheme, introduced new budgets for project funding, and started to fund the cooperation between science and industry, and got industry involved into the scientific technical work. And that was a big change. And that also went with an increase in funding. The federal government just decided on the action plan on fusion. So that was a decision by the whole government. So that shows that there is really a political momentum behind that, with the goal, as you mentioned, to build the first fusion power plant in Germany. And that has led to the fact that the budget increase is from roughly 150 million euros a year, that was the institutional funding in former times, to close to 800 million euros a year in 2029. And I think that's quite a substantial increase.
Yeah, it is. But so it's recognized then by the government that more funding will be required to actually get to the power plant solution at the end of it?
Absolutely. I mean, one aspect of the funding is, in Hartmut Sohm's concept, the TRL levels. I think the funding strategy is to fund projects that concretely are aimed to increase the TRL in all the fusion technologies. And there are a lot of technologies that you have to look at and where you have to increase the TRL in order to get closer to a power plant. So that's one important strategic goal. But then I think we are also talking about facilities. We need research infrastructures. We need facilities that demonstrate technologies. They will be expensive, I assume. So I think that's also justification for the increase in budgets that we can build up and set up these kinds of infrastructures.
Yeah, understand. But now Germany is not the only country interested in fusion, right? So the US has a bold decadal vision for commercial fusion energy. Japan has also announced the intention to be the first to build a fusion power plant. China is investing billions. And also the UK was the first to declare their plan for a prototype power plant called STEP, and also to start the discussions on the regulatory framework. Now, David, the UK has invested a lot in fusion power. If you compare the British and the German approach, what similarities and differences do you see?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me to this conference and this discussion, because I'm really pleased to hear what is happening in Germany. And, you know, we can't further fusion from Britain without partnerships and without working together and sharing some common ideas. And the most important one, as we move into a pathway to commercialization, is an industrial base that has the capability to deliver the subsystems, and then an integrator that can put it together. And I think you're absolutely right, Hartmut, that we are moving up the TRLs to get to that point. And so this is the time where we need to start thinking, who's going to do this? And the private sector is going to be the main player in delivering fusion power plants. And UK and Germany and other European countries need great engineering companies to work together on that. So what are we doing in the UK? Well, we've had 70 years or more of research on fusion at the Atomic Energy Authority, which is the UK's national lab. And actually, we're blessed by having 40 years of that with the JET project, which was the Joint European Torus, an EU-funded program. And the legacy of all of that work sums up to a lot of expertise that still resides in the UK, and the government has chosen to invest in that expertise and build out arguably the best set of laboratories in the different constituent parts that are needed for fusion to happen. And on the back of that, still surprises me because as chairman of the authority for 5 years, we worked through 3 different prime ministers with the British government, and now another one. We have been able to receive some rather large awards of funding comparative to other countries, the latest being £2.5 billion. And that is for the next 3.5 years for the detailed design phase. We've completed the first phase of design, the outline design phase for the STEP power plant. But the mission and UK Industrial Fusion Solutions has come out from the lab and is currently a limited company, a private company, which one owner, which is the British government, but ready to receive private sector ownership as we build out. Our mission is actually not just to create a power plant, but just as importantly, to seed an industry that can build fusion. And you can't do, I think, one without the other. No one's going to invest in an industry if they're not doing anything. And you know, one reason I'm so pleased to hear the stories in Germany and the momentum that's gaining is it gives more traction for industry to invest because they can work on breeder blankets for German machines and British machines and machines we want to build elsewhere. And if you don't start to signal that in the market, you'll be building yet another bespoke research machine and pulling together a supply chain from scratch. It'll cost you an awful lot of money, and it won't leave anything with momentum into the future. So we're all in the same boat, actually. we need to... By the way, I don't care who gets there first. I think the Chinese will, but I don't care, in that we really need fusion to happen, and we want to happen in the best possible way with really good industrial players coming out of Europe to build out.
So, Peter, building an industry, do you agree is that it's not just about the final end point of the pilot plant or the power plant, it's actually about building up the industrial capabilities? Is that the other goal for government? Or how much economic impact do you think there is from building up the industries?
I think it's absolutely essential to build up the whole supply chain for a fusion power plant, and that will be a huge supply chain either for laser fusion or for magnetic fusion. And of course, I mean, at the end, we're talking about the business. I mean, it's not the state that operates a fusion power plant. There should be a business case. We hope there will be one, but that's a challenge. I mean, first, I think science is okay. On technology, we are working, but we also need the economic viability. You need to run a power plant 24/7, close to 24/7 in the future. So, yeah, you need the whole value chain. You need to build up industry, and I think that's really a long way to go there, as David mentioned, to have a sustainable supply chain built up, and of course earning money with selling their products, probably worldwide, for building up fusion power plants. Yeah.
So you think there will be strategic technologies that will be sold worldwide or to other countries?
I mean, we are also, I think, talking about IP and IP management and IP portfolios, and that will be an essential part of the business. Yeah.
So bringing the industry in now it's a critical time for that. But so Frank, going over to talk a bit more about the industry perspective, do you think the industry is ready to step up to the challenge of fusion, or does it need more in terms of certainty or funding or information? Do you think it's ready, or is anything missing?
You just mentioned in 2022 the great success of the National Ignition Facility in the US. Just think about when it's has been started to be built. It's more than 20 years ago, and German companies were actually part of that in the supply chain, delivering products to that. And it's not just one, there are multiple companies here in Germany which can provide science, which can provide engineering and products which are crucial, which are required for these kind of applications. So from that perspective, I would say industry is already in since years, but industry sees as well the challenges which are ahead of us to be the right partner in building up one of these power plants. And independent which kind of approach at the end will be the fastest one, the final target is actually to achieve an interesting electricity pricing for everyone. You have as a target 9 cents per kilowatt hour as an example, and now you have to go down up to your supply chain and to be capable to produce fast in the required quality, but obviously to costs which are interesting to pursue that approach.
And am I right in thinking that the cost then is going to be, let's say, should we say not a challenge, but a key thing to think about? Because if you're building something for the scientific research, maybe the price is not so much of an issue, whereas if you're building it for a power plant and to get the electricity price down, how much of a challenge do you think that is?
That's actually a huge challenge, and add on this one the economical and political situations. I think everyone in Germany has felt what happened with our energy costs in the last years, and this is all going into that game. So there are, for industry, important topics like how far can you automize that to produce in the volume that this makes sense. For a lot of partners in these kind of projects, you are looking for a second possibility to use actually their products, what they are doing. Just as a little example, Heraeus Covantics is providing fused silica for the optical elements in these kind of laser systems. Yes, we are happy to join that and develop further the products, but we have the unique opportunity to sell that not just to Fusion. We can sell that to the open market, and this is reducing a lot the risk for us. But there are other partners which have to develop specifically a product with no second use. And these are the ones which need the support, which needs, I don't want to say promises, but they need to have a guarantee and a certain kind of security when they entering that path.
That's an interesting distinction there, isn't it, then, between the technologies that have another market and the ones that are specific for fusion. And then you require the certainty there that it's worth investing in the development, I suppose, of developing your systems and processes. No, that's a good distinction. So is there anything else missing, do you think, that how could industry better step up to this challenge? What do you need?
Specifically, when we think about unique technologies, we have the magnets, which is a very important thing with a strong community here in Germany. We have the whole optics development, where we have a strong community here. So I think it's important to specifically focus on these key technologies, provide additional funding on that one to further develop that, because this are at the end the technology, and as you said, which can be used in multiple countries. It's not just here in Germany only. It is only possible when everyone internationally works together on these kind of points, and when the industry can see already before the first electricity is produced in a plant like that they have spill-off effects and even can sell products to other applications, learn, improve their own products. That's where the support is still required from the government body.
So play to the strengths.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned about some different approaches, and so there are a number of different approaches to fusion. Well, two main categories, you could say: magnetic confinement fusion or inertial confinement fusion. So magnetic confinement are things like tokamaks or stellarators. Inertial confinement, more like laser fusion, but there are other ways of doing it as well. Germany has a strong research history in magnetic confinement, Hartmut, and also but a lot of some of the best laser and optics in the world, right, as well. So should Germany focus, let's say, Hartmut, on magnetic confinement, do you think, or is it a distraction to go for the laser approach as well?
So as I said before, I think the magnetic fusion is, in terms of the reactor concept, magnetic fusion is further advanced. I think the decision to sort of have both technologies being funded at present is not a bad one, as long as there is enough money for it, so it doesn't go from one to the other. if we can do this, this is great. I think one important thing is the further you go from the plasma, the further away you go from the plasma, the more similar the technologies are. I mean, our plasma has like 10 orders of magnitude different densities, so there's no way the plasma sort of parameters are the same. But if you think of the breathing blanket, for example, which is hidden behind some wall and sees the neutrons, converts them into tritium, there is where we have this sort of handshake. So I think this kind of technology development is something that is important for any DT-based fusion, and so I'm happy if this is funded by both of them. Otherwise, I think, as I said before, magnetic fusion clearly I mean, in Germany you said tokamak and stellarator, but while we certainly claim to be amongst the leaders in magnetic fusion, we would claim to be the world leader in stellarators with the largest device, and quite rightly the German government has decided to go for a stellarator fusion power plant, which may not be the fastest, but may be the best one in the end, I think.
David?
Yeah, I'm completely agree with you, Hartmut, on your position there, but you will note that the British government has backed a spherical tokamak design. And, you know, going back to that question about commercial, my team is intent on building out a pathway for commercializing fusion, which means that every decision we take about the design is tested as to whether there may be some commercial viability about moving it ahead. We chose an apple-shaped machine because the cost of the magnets is likely to be very much less than a donut-shaped machine. That was a commercially driven decision that you wouldn't necessarily take if you were building a research machine. And so that's just an illustration of that pathway. Once you get thinking down that route, you have to make some decisions about how you're going to pursue it. And Britain's a small country. It's not quite broke, but it's got a big debt. And it's not able to pursue all the wonderful areas that our scientists and ourselves would like it to pursue. And it's made a decision at this point to try and work through on the spherical tokamak idea. And that's based on a lot of logic and evidence. You know, we ran JET for 40 years with our partners in Europe, which was a toroidal tokamak. And we want to make it happen. Now, to do that, it's going to cost tens of billions of euros or pounds just to build the first plant. And let's just be realistic about what we need. We're building a 2 gigawatt power facility with a brand new kettle that no one's designed and built before. So even just building the 2 gigawatt facility, you can look at how much it costs in Germany, France, or the UK. It's a big, major project. And we can't afford to do 3 of those in Britain. We can afford just about to get going on one with 2.5 billion for the design before we start building. And then we're going to have to go into partnership with industry and investment to bring the tens of billions. So whilst we'd love to do different variants in the UK, we've had to pick one that we think we might be able to succeed in. And that's the nature of where I think a lot of the fusion projects are at the moment around the world.
Peter?
Just a short comment, because I think that touches a very fundamental question of the strategy, also of the funding strategy of the government. First, I think it's fair to say at the moment the technology race is not decided. We don't know, even if the arguments by Hartmut Sohm are true, that perhaps magnetic fusion is more advanced in some fields. But I think it would not be correct to say that we can be sure that magnetic fusion will win the race. So our strategy is, at least for the moment, to be open to all technologies, to keep several horses in the race, if you like. But certainly, David, as you mentioned, at some point we have to take decisions. Perhaps we can fund some infrastructures and some technology demonstrators on a smaller scale in order to do further tests on the viability of the concepts. But at one point we have to take decisions, and certainly Germany will also not be in a position to build 4 demonstration power plants. So the decision will be taken at some point. Not yet, fortunately, if you like,
Peter,
but at some point.
If I were sitting here as a minister from the British government, I'd say almost exactly the same as you've said. But I'm not. I'm sitting here as the chairman of a newly created company to build out on a demonstration plant and to create an industry. Mm-hmm. And then my commonality with what you've said is where Hartmut was, that a lot of what we need to make outside of the further away we get from the plasma will be in common with almost anything else. So I completely agree. We don't know whether a spherical, a toroidal, tokamak, a stellarator magnetic confinement device is going to be the dominant design in a commercial market by 2070. No one knows that. Or whether inertial confinement also has them or is the winner. But what we do know, I think, with some confidence is someone somewhere, and we'll be part of it, is going to make fusion happen. And we want our industry to have some strong play in some major parts of those systems. And by the way, one of the systems is new generative AI, complex engineering, design, optioneering capabilities, because it takes too long to get design teams to work down each of the channels and then come back together. And we're already creating that. We spun out 2 AI companies that can be used in other major projects, to your point, Frank. You know, we're creating useful IP that goes into adjacent industries. So whilst we might not be the right flavor ultimately, the pursuit of trying to do this is a forcing house that brings industry in, and there'll be enough value captured by industry that will help the UK economy and hopefully the European economy, whether it's a spherical tokamak, an inertial confinement dominant design that gets built out thousands of times, or the stellarator. And our firms will be very happy to work on your stellarator in 2060 if that is the way that the commercial market has gone.
So are you saying then, David, that that it doesn't matter, let's say, if STEP fails, like if the spherical tokamak isn't the one, there's still going to be enough value built up by building up the industry that you can
So Melanie,
to another?
in these very big science, deep science areas that you bring out to market, there's the sort of zero-sum game of success and failure doesn't necessarily hold. I mean, you could debate for the rest of the afternoon, was Concorde a failure or success, right? It generated a hell of a lot of technologies that built in companies like BAE Systems and Airbus Industries, without which we wouldn't be as strong today, but no one's flying Concorde anymore. So I think, I don't know, no one knows whether STEP's going to be a success, but I will be held responsible for getting ideas out of the development of STEP into productive commercial use, either in adjacent markets, and Frank's given some examples. I could give a string of examples where we've got startups and technologies already going into other uses, as well as then furthering the fusion industries for the future. And sort of daughter of STEP and granddaughter of STEP may be something that we'll see in the marketplace. But STEP's a prototype. You know, we've got to have a minimum viable product to get investment in, and we'll move from there. And that's a big task in this industry.
And Frank, from your perspective in industry, how is it for you in the face of this uncertainty and these debates that we're having? Like, what does that mean for you and your business?
So actually, we try to do something which we haven't done before, and this is very important. So there's a lot of proof of principles still ongoing, and as we've heard on that table, there are uncertainties, and it's okay. If we would not have sent Lila in space, we would not have been, you know what I mean with that, yeah? So I think the motivation is there. The motivation of the industry is there, yeah, to join that. There are a lot of government-funded projects running here in Germany since 2-3 years, which are picking out a small part of that whole big challenge, yeah. German government is funding money into that one, and in these projects we have a lot of companies along the supply chain already included. So sometimes it sounds like we are just talking and nothing is happening. No, actually, it is already happening, and the industry is joining that, willing to join that, even put to a certain point money into that. Yeah. What is missing, and this is to your question, the risk discussion around all that when we're talking specifically about the industry. But on that point, at least to whomever I'm talking about here in Germany, they are motivated, they will, and they are ready for that, and even willing to invest.
Thank you. Peter, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to make a short comment on what David said. I think I agree on one point. We need to get started. Yeah, I mean, whoever makes the design, we need to build facilities. We need to have things getting built and involve industry in order to build up the know-how and the knowledge. So there's no point in waiting. We just perhaps have a little bit of different approach in who is like heading the initiative. I mean, we are looking at startups, at companies that have concepts, and we are trying to make it possible to investigate if those concepts are valid, but let's get going. So that's, I think, on that we agree.
Thank you. So, of course, so I think we agree that industrial involvement is going to be essential to get there. But Peter, you mentioned the fusion startups. What do you see as the place of the fusion startups? These are the private companies that are developing the fusion technology and power plant designs. Where's their place in all of this?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to acknowledge that the startups have changed the fusion landscape dramatically, again, if compared to like 10 years ago. I mean, they are pushing and pulling at the same time, bringing a lot of dynamics and really wanting to get something done. So I think that reflects in a way the new political goal of saying we want to have the first power plant in Germany. So there's ambition to get something achieved. But of course, on the long run, I think it's also fair to say that the startups alone will not be able to build a fusion power plant, which has a lot of complexity from a technological point of view. So again, here we are at the point of that we have to broaden the industrial base of fusion, that we have to involve even more industry and get industry involved in not only, well, delivering components, but also putting fusion on their strategic agendas and being involved in the overall supply chain of fusion. I think that is very important. And so I think that means that we try to establish a framework in which the startups can be successful. But I think they need a startup, and we often talk about the fusion ecosystem, but I think that reflects those kinds of approach to make possible that the startups can flourish and can be successful in that environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's industrial involvement on many levels, should we say.
Correct.
Yeah, Ahmed.
I think this is a really important point. When you asked Frank, is industry ready? He said, we're already involved. And I thought if you asked him, is industry ready to take over? He would probably have said, not yet. And this, I think, is the role of the startups. There's this sort of valley of death where sort of industry is not yet engaging in terms of taking the lead. And then startups appear and they have private money they bring in and say, okay, we are ready, we take more risk and we're ready to go with this. And this has sort of this effect which takes other industries with us as well. And I think this is a really important role in this system, just when you're at the edge of this, in the TRL speak, between 6 and 7, for example, where we really need this.
Mm-hmm. So we need them to kind of carry the torches across the valley of death. David?
Yeah, it depends what you mean by a fusion startup. I mean, 10 years ago, there were a number that started themselves up in order to build out on a whole integrated power plant design and make that happen. Most of those have pivoted to a position of comparative strength in a specialized area of a subsystem. I mean, there's a very good one, Tokamak Energy, which came out of the Atomic Energy Authority, which is one of the world leaders in high-temperature superconducting magnets and how to wind the tape. And you know, they've pivoted largely, I won't speak for their strategy, you can read that, but they've pivoted largely from being a plan to build a spherical tokamak to one that is going to be a major system supplier to it, with a lot of the knowledge there. I did just want to flip this back round because we're at Falling Walls and it's a celebration of science. And you said something, Melanie, that I just wanted to pick over, which is, you know, where is science going to be in all of this? And I think we're at the inflection point from 70, 80 years of science, just about to see if we can go up an S-curve to develop the first products and see where this industry is going to take off. I think we're going to need more science. You know,
the time for publicly funded research is not over.
No, we're not done on the science. Anyone who thinks we're done on the science is kidding themselves. But the big problem is that science needs to change the nature of its process in order to keep up with going up the S-curve. Mm-hmm. So if you'd carried on in Britain without the STEP programme, you could fund about 8 or 10 channels of science heading towards fusion in each specialist areas for the next 30 years, and fusion still wouldn't happen. right? We created the forcing house of saying we want to design an integrated machine. That's upset a lot of scientists because they've not just been able to apply for their grants and go down the next 10 years here. We've had to get them to get results to us for a design program. And they're saying, blimey, that means we've got to work in a different way. Yes, we need really deep science, but you're going to have to work in a different way. And AI's cut right through that with these new design tools. So I think it's a reflection on where is science going in fusion, and it needs to turn around to look at this commercial opportunity, but without bending itself out of shape on the principles of good science.
Mm-hmm. Frank?
All these startups, and you mentioned where are they placed right now in that whole ecosystem. They are the binding elements between science and industry, actually. So we see that these kind of startups are in contact with industry because they are asking us the question, is that idea possible? Is that something actually you can do? And this is, in principle, the kickstarter of the discussions, transforming it from one-of-a-kind science facility like NIF or whatever, into something which can be repeatably to that high quality level produced in Germany. So I think they have that very important point, and supporting even the industry in beside the government to have some small projects running and to do even as industry a proof of principle for certain science topics.
So pushing industry even further. We need to open this up to the floor. If there are any questions out there, anyone who wants to ask, I can see one right here. If you'd like to join our discussion.
Thanks a lot for the eye-opening discussion here. So I myself, I'm a quantum physics professor in Hanover. So my question is, how do you, this is like a moon landing project, right? So the difficulty is super high. And then my question is, how do you rear the awareness and also attract the broad interest from the other community, for example, from quantum physicists, for example?
Who wants to tackle that one? So how do we bring in others or raise the interest?
I can say this on the academic level. So I think on the academic level, we do some outreach. We do a lot of, actually, I do a YouTube channel, which you can look at. So, and thank you. Leave a click then. So, I think we're doing a lot of outreach publicly, but also on the academic level. And there is actually, we see that there is a lot more interest from the community, and we also bridge, like, for example, computer science, AI, as you mentioned. We have very sort of difficult control problems. We have people who all of a sudden even start talking to us on their own initiative and say, this is great, and I have a nonlinear controller which does blah, blah, blah also. So I think you raise the awareness, and it's, as a Max Planck Society, as a Max Planck director, I have to say, even if you do targeted research, this is such a crazily amazing field in terms of the science that it is still wonderfully rich and attractive. And so this is at present, I see this growing, but you have to work on it. I mean, it's not a small lab sort of secluded thing where you do something in hiding, but it's something you have to speak about, and this is a great thing, and come join us. And then you sort of see the guys chipping in. So I think we've been quite successful over the last years in this. Mm-hmm.
And AI is quite useful, but
yes,
ChatGPT hasn't yet designed a fusion power plant. It's kind of like asking my 3-year-old grandson to design the power plant, asking ChatGPT. But I was going to answer this question just from a slightly different angle, because in the UK we've already got our site to build the plant on. It's an old coal-fired power station we've acquired in a very run-down part of the country in the East Midlands, where there's been a lot of job losses and there's need for economic regeneration. And we're delighted. We have a big outreach program into the local communities, into the local companies, into the schools in a big region. And we're absolutely delighted by, the engagement. It's not just a flow from us to them. They come back with their questions, their school projects. There's all sorts of interest now. And I don't think the UK government would have funded this money in the current state of affairs if that community, that big district, hadn't said, we really want fusion to happen here, because of the jobs, because of the growth, because of the hope that it's giving to those communities. And they're our best ambassadors. They're so excited, and they're becoming more and more knowledgeable. So, yeah, we'd love quantum professors to join our program because they've got big brains and lots of ways of doing things. But we also need the local communities that we're going to be building with first to get on board. And that started to happen. That's momentum building.
And people get more interested in things when they realise why it's relevant to them as well. So they've got an interest if you're building in their area. But also there have been an increasing number of people talking about fusion, so on Substack, and you can plug into these kind of things if you know where to look. Peter, did you have something you wanted to say?
Just a very short aspect. I mean, also on the public outreach, I think we're talking about a new technology here that can be very transformative, and that has certainly risks and challenges and opportunities. And so I think we need a public debate on that. And this is also acknowledged in the action plan by the government. We are certainly committed to do that, and even stronger in the future.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? There's one here, yes.
Thank you very much. Dimitri Momotenko, I'm a professor in Uni Oldenburg here in northwestern Germany. I'm not into this topic that's deep, but you mentioned an electricity price of 9 eurocent per kilowatt hour. I'm just curious, let's say, if a similar technology developed in, I don't know, in China or US, will the electricity price will be roughly the same? So it will be like a great energy equalizer, or what is going to happen?
Your grandchildren might experience that.
Yeah, who wants to take that?
Well, I think honestly, of course, we are hearing a lot of assumptions on the price of fusion energy in the future. I'm not sure if it's really reliable at this moment of technological development, but I think it doesn't matter at this point. We are in a phase where we say we need to explore this technology. It's high risk, high gain. If we can make it happen, I'm very confident, and okay, if it doesn't cost too much, it's for sure, but I really think it can make a huge difference. And of course, we will have to, I mean, Frank mentioned that already, we have to go to all the value chain to explore economies of scale and to push the price down. That will be a hard exercise. But I think, I mean, there's no point in saying at this time, we don't pursue fusion because it might be too expensive. So let's work and wait and see.
Peter, in our program, we refuse to even engage in that discussion.
Okay.
And we're trying to hold it off for as long as possible, even with our treasury and the government, because, first of all, we don't know how much the plant's going to cost, because we haven't finished designing it. Yeah. It's like saying, how much is a house going to cost over here, but you haven't designed the house. You don't know what size it is. So it's impossible for my program to engage in anything about a strike price, and we're not designing a machine to be, in the first instance, commercially viable. I think if we are successful with STEP, which is our demonstration minimum viable product, it will be the second, third, probably the fourth or fifth machine revision that we start to get some idea of what the strike price will be. But we're not waiting till 2040 to start designing the second, third, fourth or fifth machine. We'll be working on that fairly soon because we want to get there quickly. But it's impossible to know how much it's going to cost until we have a fully designed machine.
But you did say earlier that you are making decisions from a commercial perspective, so choosing the size of it.
You can do that.
And that's a major difference between a fully academic pursuit, shall we say, where it can be any size and any cost, to actually taking decisions for a commercial reason.
And we will have to justify why we've chosen certain supply chain partners, even if we have a big tranche of private money in this program, which we will have to have because government isn't going to. I don't foresee government making all of the money we need to build out. We will still need to justify every decision based on the price in the supply chain. And that's a discipline that will get you on the commercial pathway.
Thank you. We have time for one more really quick question, if there is one. Just over here. Very quick answers.
Yes. Sorry. Very quick question. Tom Philbeck, Strategic Advisor with Frontiers for the Science House in Davos. I was speaking with a nuclear researcher a couple of weeks ago, and they said in the discussions around fusion, the one thing that's never really talked about as often eschewed is the fuel cycle. And where does the fuel come from? How are we going to go about doing this? I've then immediately went and did a research on all of the articles that were pumped out, and the out of gas articles, et cetera, are, there are plenty. And then there are a few that say that, they've used vanadium oxide and things to find little things. Can someone really tell us, are we even going to have any fuel to run these multi-billion-dollar things once we get there?
Fuel cycle. So much for a quick question. Hartmut, did you?
So I think I mentioned as the main technological obstacle remaining the breeding blanket, which is then the fuel cycle in the end. The supply of tritium is not enough to run even one power plant on a gigawatt level for 1 year unless you are successful in the breeding. So it's really crucial that you do. I think the civil amount of tritium is like 30 kilogram, and it's 54 per full power year gigawatt. So you really have to do this. But this is something where we really are after. I mean, in development programs, we have a specialized device which is going for a high neutron flux, which is being built in Granada, Spain, known as IFMIF, which can be used for this as well. Yeah. And this is the big development. And I think STEP is already addressing.
Well, we have part of our program, we have a new laboratory to build out on the design of this breeder blanket. We already have a laboratory which is looking at the tritium fuel cycle, how we manage the tritium fuel and pelletize it. So that's working. Each one of these is about 200 million euro investment by the British government. One of the reasons why I think the private sector isn't going to do this all on its own, because if you go to a venture capitalist and say, we've got this brilliant design, but we haven't got a fuel cycle. And the people who really know about this, like the British team, have had to get 200 million from the government just to do some lab work on the fuel cycle. They're going to run out of money. So, and by the way, we can't do this in Britain on our own. We need one or two other really substantial labs to buddy up with to get that science going. But we're on it on our program because we have to.
Just a very short comment. I think, first of all, it's acknowledged, really. And second, I think that's one of the prime examples for international cooperation.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, big challenge. People are working on it. I say. Right, we've got a quick fire final round. What is the next step we need to take to break down the walls to commercial fusion? I'm going to come to each of you in turn. Hartmut.
Take advantage of the German knowledge, build a stellarator which of the size that you can show that your energy production is exceeding 1 inside the plasma. So this is a jet-sized stellarator, maybe a bit bigger than this, and this will lead us into the burning plasma physics nuclear area on this.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, from our side, I mean, it's two joined up things. One is, we talked about fusion startups. We really need the big engineering capabilities across Europe to start working with us on this and to invest and be patient and put their best engineering design teams. And that will couple in with the other one, which is bringing private investment. Big private investment, and we've got the VC side, the venture capital side is starting to work for the startups, but we need the power generation companies, some sovereign wealth and others to come in. They probably won't come in until we have that industrial muscle from the likes of a Siemens and Airbus Industries, a Rolls-Royce, coming into our programs. We're on it in the UK. We haven't got there. I'm not saying where we're going to with it, but if I come back next year or the year after, we hope we'll have some progress on it.
But it's a good time, you'd say, for people to start watching, keeping track of what's happening, and getting ready to.
And we've seen. I mean, just to congratulate Eni, the Italian oil and gas company, for actually getting into this and realising they can do two things. One is they've got financial resources, and two is they've got engineering capability, both of which the fusion industries need.
Strategic partners, and the Japanese are doing a lot of that as well.
Japanese are doing it, and we're working with them too. Yeah.
And anyone who is interested in finding out more about these things, take a look at Fusion Energy Insights and Fusion X as well, because that can help you to get in. Frank?
So, industrial view from that perspective. Go from brilliant research actually in real construction. It is a big challenge, regulations. We are talking about tens of billions of euros. And as we've heard today as well, the supply chain is crucial. Without the industrial support, this is getting a very long, long way to go. We have in Germany companies which are working in that. We have the supply chain for a lot of, I don't tell everyone, but a lot of these smaller projects which are supporting that. It's time to get them running.
Thank you. And final word from Peter.
Yeah, I think there you can talk about many technological breakthroughs that are necessary on the way to a fusion power plant. But I think more basically, we need to break a lot of walls in the heads of people. It's a question of the spirit. And I think if we want to build a fusion power plant, the spirit has to change, the spirit for cooperation. Yeah, and I think we are asking a lot of industry and of science in order to get there. But yeah, I think we can do it.
I think we can do it. Thank you very much, everyone.